Do you wish that all things wealth and finance were much easier to understand and not presented by a bunch of beige cardigan-wearing geeks? Welcome to the Clever Investor Podcast, where we're dishing up the easiest to understand finance program served in bite-sized chunks, so your brain will thank you as your knowledge grows. Hosted by the brilliant Owen Taylor, a multiple award-winning expert with a glorious knack for explaining the complex world of wealth in the simplest of ways.
Hey, Clever Investors, and welcome to another show. In the world of sports and finance, the journey from being a high-level professional athlete to using the skills learned to create wealth is a fascinating parallel. Both paths require dedication, resilience, and strategic thinking, but each offers distinct challenges and rewards as well. High-level professional athletes nowadays often measure their success in terms of their physical prowess, competitive achievements, and the fame it attracts. Athletes are often devoting years to rigorous training, mastering their craft, pushing the boundaries of human performance. And these athletes understand that any form of greatness requires sacrifice, hard work, and discipline. This pursuit of excellence becomes their purpose, and they live for the thrill of victory. But what happens when it's all over? In the Clever Investor Podcast studio today, we have a very special guest. He is a work colleague of mine at Blue Wealth Property. He's also somebody that has spent a fair amount of time being an athlete for many years, understands this side of things, and comes from a family of very well-known professional athletes too. So he understands the other side of this very much. He's also a businessman, and he's also an investor himself. So he understands discipline from both sides. Andrew Mortimer, welcome to the Clever Investor Podcast. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Thanks, Owen. No, thanks for having me on. I think you're being very generous by calling me an athlete. But my background, as you said, I'm a colleague of yours here at Blue Wealth, working in the business development side of the business. My background is in rugby league. My family, my father and my uncles played professionally, or at least played at the top of the game. It wasn't necessarily fully professional from an income point of view, but they achieved some great things on the footy field. So I've got a lifelong passion for the sport. Played a little bit myself at a lower grade level, and have also worked in rugby league over the time.
It might be lower grade to you, but it was higher grade to me, okay? And higher grade to a lot of people that played it.
No, well, the 4 or 5 games that I managed to play of reserve grade are firmly in my mind, but no one else's.
So you spoke about your family of semi-professional athletes, but really at the time we could deem them as being professionals. But was it like nowadays? Did they have jobs?
They did. So playing league, and I'm sure it would be the same for AFL and other professional sports back in the 80s, they had to work. So it was effectively, they were good at their recreation or good at their sport that they enjoyed playing, and hence were able to play in the top league and achieve some good things. But they did have to work. My father had, through his career, worked for a few different businesses associated with the Bulldogs who he played with, and then also had his own sporting outlets, shoe stores through his career.
So unlike their equivalents today, who are full-time professionals,
yep,
they don't do anything else.
Well, not during their playing career. They do. My understanding is that the NRL and the clubs have education programs and some other, programs in place to help their players prepare for life after footy, by through education, through sourcing a job. A lot of the players these days come into professional sport at a very young age, fresh out of high school, or a year or two into either a degree or a TAFE course or a trade. So they haven't worked professionally or had a profession, so to speak, prior to potentially making it in the top grade or being on the fringe of that. So that they haven't had to work or don't have to work through their career from an income perspective, at least in the top grade.
So if we're looking at the example then of rugby league, which both you and I are massive fans of, they are professionals at a very they've got a very sort of small skill set, right? And then what happens traditionally? What happens when their career is over?
Well, I think the wider public, we see the players that manage to play for 10 years plus and manage to then leverage their playing career into a post either media career or ambassadorial or advocacy role for other businesses. But the average NRL career is 4 years, give or take, with an average income, which is pushing up, but around the sort of 250 to 300,000 per year. So the public see a glamorous side of players earning lots of money and doing all of this, but it's a very, very short window that these professional athletes have to not necessarily set themselves up for life, but to ensure that they've got the right things in place to leverage their career into post-career opportunities, post-playing career opportunities.
So you say that the average is 4 years at an income that most of us go, wow, that's fantastic. But average meaning the middle bit. There's a lot that don't actually get to that. Their career is cut short from injury, or it could be just that they didn't get the break that they needed. I know you're doing a lot of work with rugby league clubs as well, with helping get education out there for it. How do you think things have changed then from the 1970s, 80s era to now?
Well, I think one of the good things is that by the nature of the game going professional and sport going professional through the sort of 90s, there are a lot more programs like ours, like the one that we're trying to implement and have presented to a few of the clubs, that are helping these players to understand what they should be doing and how they can set themselves up for post-playing career, both from a work and a wealth creation point of view. Comparing it to when my father played and my uncles, there was minimal to no sort of extracurricular programs, if you like, around the playing group. That said, by the nature of them being semi-professional or having a job and having a network, their mindset was different. It was they had the opportunity to have a life outside of football during their playing career, so they weren't in the bubble as such. It probably changed towards the back end of Dad's career, but it was relatively normal.
So the transition of retiring from league, do you think that was a lot easier in those days than it could be?
I think so. I mean, there's good and bad, I guess, stories right throughout each era of the game in terms of players finishing their playing career. But I think it was because they were living a lot more normal life, a lot more stable life in regard to employment. So it really wasn't as big a come down, where you see a lot of athletes struggle these days if they've had a illustrious career or managed to compete at a high level for a long time, to transition back to normal life. I mean, it's sometimes the analogy of coming out of the armed forces works, but that's a massive exaggeration because it's a totally different level of occupation, but it's sort of coming back from an institutionalised process where you're told where to be, what to do, how to train, what to eat. You're basically monitored through your career.
The modern day first grade NRL player, they are, if they're not playing for the 80 minutes that we see them on telly running around on the weekend, they are the days after the game, they're then in recovery and retrain and how many days a week would they get off?
Probably one. at best.
Right. So there's not much opportunity for them to carry on with their bricklaying career.
No, that's right.
One day off.
That's right. And there's a perception that league AFL players have all this time on their hands in between playing games. It's not the case. They're putting in certainly in terms of training and then other sponsorship commitments, community commitments. They're putting in big hours.
So if we then look at the contrast then to when your dad was playing, how many days a week were they training then?
2 to 3.
Two to 3.
And by that, it's not a 9 to 5. These guys today are in there getting their skin folds, getting their testing done before they get into the gym and all of this sort of stuff. In Dad's era, it was probably 2 to 3 training sessions of a couple of hours each prior to the game. So literally probably the same as what the park footy player is doing as well. Yeah, relatively comparable.
And then going out and playing, the big game here.
Yes.
And at a very high and brutal level as then. And then they had to, pick themselves up and go and work their job. If we're looking at the extremes here then, so the 1980s, let's say, when most of the players you're saying were being paid to play rugby league, but they also had a job. And nowadays where these are full-time proper professional athletes being looked after, groomed for media, the whole thing like this, there was obviously a transition point where they were not working anymore in a 9 to 5 job and being a full-time professional athlete. Do you think there was a point in time where those people were maybe suffering a bit because they didn't have the support that they've got now? I mean, nowadays they've got, player managers and there's support and there's the things that you and Blue Wealth are doing with educating.
Yeah, so it really became proper professional, for want of a better phrase. That's not a very professional way to say that. In the sort of early to mid-90s. So I think there was a time where you had players like my father and his counterparts had their work-play balance. Then suddenly pay packets have started to rise relative to what they're earning outside of rugby league.
Yeah.
And so they didn't need to work outside, or at least the top level didn't need to have another profession, but the support wasn't necessarily there. So I think there definitely were people, some athletes, some players that struggled post-career, transitioning out of that. That said, I think a lot of it also comes back to the individual. Like a lot of the stuff we're doing now and other, the RLPA and other organisations are doing is you can only lead a horse to water. So you can only put this information, help them, guide them as much as you can. There will be players, and there are some fantastic stories of players currently who are investing, who are educating themselves, who are preparing themselves for life after rugby league. And these are top level names as well as mid tier names, if you like. And there were players back in that transition to professionalism that also could handle the exit. Earned at that time good money, and then were happy to exit. Were capable and able to transition out of their footy career. So it does come back to the individual a little bit, but that's why the support these days is so much more important, or has built to this point, because each year it's increasingly becoming additionally professional in terms of time requirements, in terms of body management, in terms of everything that the athlete, the player, needs to do to put themselves on the field each week. And
there's only, I suppose, so many careers in the media and for at the club itself for these athletes.
Definitely. It's only a real one of the things Dad used to say to me when I was attempting to become a professional rugby league player and come up through the grades is, to keep level heads, is there's only, he would say there's 300 halfbacks across New South Wales, for argument's sake. Only 30 of them are going to get into the next tier. And then of those 30, only sort of 3 are going to make a long-term career out of it. So he was sort of trying to keep things in check in that it's a very hard, achievement to get to the top of the game, to then have a career length and experiences through that career that puts you in good stead to then leverage that into a media career. There's only X amount of commentator roles going around. And so for the vast majority of, firstly, the players that don't make it, that don't necessarily achieve an NRL career, they have to obviously have a vocation or be working towards something in the event that they don't achieve what they want to. And then even for the players that do, as we touched on before, their career on average is 4 years. So there's players that'll play 1 year, So they're not going to have a career that allows them to leverage it into post-career opportunities. They need to be actively working or actively working towards a profession.
And so if we go back to this high amount of income that young minds can get very soon, it could all go to mud.
Well, it's actually, I guess, almost like a Trojan horse. It's you get this cash, get this great earning capacity early in your career. I think in our presentation we look at it at 6 times. A 21-year-old playing NRL is earning on average 6 times what his or her counterpart, just going through uni or going through a trade is earning. So they've got this early boost of income, but not the skills generally to know how to manage that and know what to do with that. And then they only have it for a short amount of time. So their friend who's gone to uni or who's getting a trade or an apprenticeship, their earning potential, trajectory over time is steadily up, where the NRL athlete or the professional athlete potentially has this great spike early in their 20s that drops off a cliff quickly. And if they haven't, one, put that money to use, or two, taken the opportunity they have while they're in the professional system to set themselves up for a career, for a profession from, let's say the age of 25, 26, there's a lot of your life left after that you need to work for and fund. So it can actually work to their detriment if they don't have the right people around them guiding them.
Mm. And I think, as you said, if you look at a graph of this, I'm hastened to say it, but the average Australian, early, in their late teens, the wage is slowly growing over time. It peaks at a certain point in our life, and then it remains around that sort of thing. And if we looked at that across the average person's working life, if you looked at that purely from an economics point of view, it's better to just go and get a job.
That's right.
Yeah.
Your career earnings, if you like. It's the traditional go and get a job, get a trade, get an apprenticeship, get a uni degree and go and find a job is going to put you in a greater position on average over the long term than if you manage to become an athlete at a young age.
So tell us about the work and the initiatives that you've been working on with the team. What's the objective from the end of it from the players' point of view? So
the program we've built, the presentations that Tony and myself have presented to a few of the clubs. We've been in front of 2 clubs a couple of times now and getting in front of a few others and had meetings across the game. The presentation is a variation of Blue Wealth's Wealth Through Property presentation, which basically drills into the why we should be investing. And I guess the central theme of our standard presentation, if you like, is you should invest because that's going to be the most effective way to set yourself up for retirement and have the retirement you want, or have financial choices in the future. Where the theme of the NRL presentation, if you like, is similar in that you should be thinking about the long term, but it's more about you guys have a great opportunity for a small window of time. This is what you should be doing with it. You should be looking at investing. You should be looking at using the resources around you during your short NRL career to network, to skill yourself up for post-career. So the presentation really drills into trying to get them to realise they've got a great opportunity, but they need to make the most of it.
And they're not necessarily going to be a professional athlete.
Correct.
For all their working.
And they
life.
don't, it's one of the things that an athlete in any pursuit, and now I think even more so in like athletics and swimming, where you really get one chance every 4 years to hit the heights in terms of the Olympics, is you don't want to think about what if it doesn't happen. You don't want to think about if I don't make it, if I have an injury, if it doesn't work out. You have to have 100% focus, as you said in the intro, on the goal you're trying to achieve and put your effort, energy, and will into achieving that. So for someone to come into your world and say, hey, you might only play for 3 years, you need to think about what's going to happen after, is a hard thing for a lot of these guys to grasp with, but it's important.
So when we've got these junior players that haven't made it to NRL level just yet, they're coming up through the ranks, are the clubs then sort of pitch into them how they're going to help look after them later on, or is it just about this is how much we're going to pay you?
No, the clubs are doing that, and we're part of that as well. So the sort of under 21s, under 19s across the clubland, they have inductions. They provide all the information that the young player needs to be part of the club and to sort of onboard themselves. And part of that is a bit of financial education, of which we're a part of that as well. So it's about giving these younger guys the knowledge, or at least the exposure that, hey, if you're going to have an NRL career or a rugby league career, that's fantastic. But these are the stuff you should put in place, hopefully before you hit those heights. And the clubs are taking on that responsibility, which is good. And it's important because a lot of these kids, as we said before, they're fresh out of school. They haven't got the life experience to know some of the basic financial literacy and other things that a lot of us would take for granted. So it's important that, and it's not just incumbent on the clubs, it's incumbent on everyone who's involved with these young players to help them get the knowledge and skills they need just to live their life and operate.
Yeah, I mean, I think as someone who is a professional educator, I think it's great to see the shift that's actually happened. Both you and I have got kids. Your kids a lot younger than my child, but they're growing up with an understanding of how to and what not to and how to do things, and a lot of these people aren't exposed to it. So
I mean, they aren't, and yeah, both your boy and my boys, they're around it. Mine aren't in that headspace yet. Obviously, they're still worried about lollies after footy and all that sort of stuff. But they're going to be exposed to that through my work, through our family. And that's one thing that I think Dad was very fortunate about, and my uncles when they came through, because there wasn't, as we've touched on, there wasn't the infrastructure around them to help them create their wealth and set up post-career investment opportunities. But my grandfather was very big on buy property. Whenever you can, just buy property, buy your house, pay it off. And back in those days, you could pay your house off in a relatively smaller time frame than you can today. Mm-hmm. So without the robust education, Dad and my uncles were put on the right path in regards to how to look after their money and invest. We've benefited as their offspring, and now those lessons have been passed on to us. And then, hence I think why I'm working where I'm working.
Yeah. So do you think your dad and that era of player, because they worked, there was a different understanding about money / wealth, that they literally were schooling themselves? They're kind of doing what the Players Association are sort of aiming towards, sort of educating them. They kind of self-educated themselves back then because they knew that it wasn't a full-time career for them.
I think they probably, this might be a bit harsh to say, they probably respected money a bit more back then. They had to.
There was less stuff to spend money on.
Well, that's true.
You had two cars to choose from.
You didn't have online shopping or anything.
Or a Ford, and that's it. Right?
That's right, yeah. No online shopping, not everyone went on a holiday twice a year, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So there was probably, that helped, but I think the fact that they had to work for a living just kept them in a relatively conservative, normal's probably not the right word, but it's sort of standard of living, because they weren't earning, even be it through their employment or through their rugby league contracts, they weren't earning 6 times what their neighbour was earning. They were maybe a pinch better off, but nothing ridiculously lavish. So they had to respect money.
Yeah,
had to know how to budget, how to make it, how to turn one into two, and all that sort of stuff.
So yet again, education is the key. Thank you for coming in today.
Pleasure, mate.
We'll definitely get you back again, because there's a lot of parallels. We talk about this a lot within the office. There's a lot of parallels between what a smart athlete and someone trying to create their wealth will actually go through. There are definite parallels with that as well. So we can talk more about this, and we will.
I'm sure we will, and I'm sure that we might have to also come on a different tangent and do a dad joke episode or something.
Yeah, so Andrew and I, or Mortz as he's known in the office, we're both known as for our brilliant dad jokes. Exceptional dad jokes. We spend a fair bit of time travelling around the countryside, going and presenting together, and we come up with a lot of great dad jokes along the way. And
we think they are anyway.
They're not appreciated by a lot of people as well. So we can definitely do that as well. But thank you again for coming in, Andrew. Wealth and I. It's great to actually hear the other side of it, because I was never a professional athlete, nor anybody in my family ever was. So it's actually really interesting to hear the other side of it, and especially from that golden era in rugby league as well. So thank you for coming in. If you enjoyed today's show, please hit the like button. Leave us a comment if you've got any questions around anything for us or for Andrew as well. Then please pop it in the chat box, send us an email, contact us here, and we'll see you again next week for another edition of the Clever Investor Podcast.
You have been listening to the Clever Investor Podcast, proudly sponsored this week by Blue Wealth Property. Are you ready to start a new investment journey? Get in touch with the industry leaders, Blue Wealth Property. Blue Wealth have a proven track record in using research to identify growth markets, and Blue Wealth have supported thousands of Australians to buy the right property in the right market at the right time. Go to bluewealth.com.au.